North Carolina just ranked #1 in the country for domestic migration. More people moved here than any other state. But most of them didn't hear about these 8 things I'm about to tell you. This is an honest look at the real problems with living here in North Carolina that frankly most agents aren't going to bring up. I've been in this market for 17 years, helped hundreds of families make this move, and I'm going to give you the full picture. You've done the math. Mortgage, insurance, monthly bills, everything lines up. Then, about 6 months after closing, a letter shows up from the county. Nothing's wrong with the house, but the number inside changes the equation, and now your budget looks different from what you had planned. That's pretty common around here right around now. It's just the reevaluation system and how it works. See, people here complain about property taxes all the time. If you spend any time in a local Facebook group, you've probably seen it. What doesn't get said as often is that North Carolina's effective tax rate is around 0.70%, and the national average is actually a little over 1%. So compared to places up north or frankly out west, New Jersey, Illinois, Texas even, it's still incredibly affordable. So what's actually causing the frustration? It's the reevaluation cycle. Counties don't reassess values every year. It usually happens every 4 to 8 years, depending on where you are. That's what creates the jump. You go years with a steady tax bill, then one notice shows up, and everything resets at once. In Forsyth County, which includes Winston-Salem, home values have jumped anywhere from 60 to all the way up to 90%. Average is probably closer to 60%. But that happened in one single cycle. That's the assessed value catching up to the market all at once. Because if it happens every 4 to 8 years, well, these last several years, that was quite a jump, right? Even if the county keeps the same rate, homeowners in rising areas still end up paying more. So if you're looking at a listing and using the current tax line to plan your budget, you got to account for the next reevaluation and what that could do. This isn't a one-time thing either. At least a dozen counties are set for reevaluation this year, and about a quarter of the state will go through it in the next year or so, and it moves across the state in waves. When we go into affordability later, this ties right into what it actually costs to own here long term. So stay with me pretty please. Now, there are some protections here. You've got revenue-neutral rules, homestead exemptions for seniors and people with disabilities, and new legislation introduced in 2026 to help homeowners during reevaluation years. And even after a big jump, most people are still paying less than they would in the states they moved from. The issue is that most people didn't see the reevaluation coming. I want you to see it coming. Before you buy anything here, find out when the county last reevaluated and when the next one is coming. Don't treat the current tax bill as your long-term number. Run the numbers ahead of time. That's the conversation I have with every client before they make an offer. And this is usually the point where people reach out and say they want to move here, but aren't sure what to budget or where to start. And that's what I help with. I work with families relocating to the Winston-Salem and Triad area all the time. And we go through all of this before and in the middle of a deal. My contact information is in the description, but let's keep going. There's a growing concern around hurricanes in North Carolina. If you've been looking into moving here, you've probably felt it or heard it, and it's not made up. But for most of the state, especially in the Triad, it doesn't tell the whole story. North Carolina has averaged more than $7 billion in weather events each year since 2020. That's a big jump from what it used to be. So yes, weather risk is a part of the conversation here, and anyone telling you otherwise isn't giving you the full picture. And then there was Helene. Late in 2024, a storm pushed inland and hit the western mountains in a way nobody here has ever seen before. Roads completely washed out. Some areas were cut off for weeks. It turned into one of the deadliest hurricanes to hit the U.S. mainland in decades. A 1,000-year flood event, something with no real comparison in the state. People here will never forget it. The coast, places like the Outer Banks and Wilmington, they take direct hits from hurricanes. The mountains can get heavy weather that makes it inland Then you get to the Piedmont right in the middle. In my 17 plus years here, the biggest event to make headlines was Helene. And in Winston-Salem, it barely showed up. Most coastal storms lose strength long before they reach the Triad. If you're buying on the coast, well, that can be a different conversation. There's real exposure there, and you need to understand the risk and what insurance will cost you before you commit. But in the Piedmont, in cities like Winston-Salem and Greensboro, you're in one of the more stable weather areas on the East Coast. There is some good news here too. The state has been investing in storm protection. Building codes have improved. There are roof programs now that help make homeowners stronger and can lower your insurance at the same time. And when you compare this to the wildfire risk out west, constant hurricane exposure in Florida, North Carolina, if you pick the right location and plan for it, is incredibly manageable. That's a conversation I have with every client, where they're buying and how the home is built. But if weather isn't what you're worried about, the next thing probably will be, because it's what I hear about most from buyers looking in the market right now. If you've spent any time scrolling listings in North Carolina, you know the feeling. You find something that looks right, you click it, and it's already under contract. Sometimes within hours. That's just what it feels like in a market that hasn't kept up with its own growth. See, North Carolina added close to 150,000 people in a single year. One of the biggest jumps in the country. All those people, they need a place to live. And supply, frankly, hasn't caught up. Across the state, there's a projected gap of about 765,000 homes over the next 5 years. Only a small number of counties still have median prices in the low 200s. And if you're looking under 300,000, in most areas people want to be, you're going to feel it. You're usually trading off location, condition, frankly, or both. And this is real. No way around it. I'll share what we're seeing on our side, because I think it might help. Over the past 3 years, about 40% of the buyers we've worked with have been first-time home buyers, and their median price has stayed between the low to mid 200,000s. We'll come back to affordability here in a bit, because that changes how you look at what matters when inventory is tight like this. Now, that doesn't mean it's easy. It means you need to have a plan, some experience, and a clear idea of where to look. New construction is starting to fill some of this gap, especially in the more affordable side. It's not fixed yet, but it's moving in the right direction. There are still areas where entry-level buyers can find real options if you know where to go. There are also down payment programs here that can help cover part of your closing costs. And compared to the last few years, the market has loosened up a little bit. Sellers are negotiating more, and buyers have a little more room than they used to. If someone told you that this market doesn't work for first-time or entry-level buyers, I'd frankly push back on that. See, we're still getting deals done in this range, and we can show you what that looks like. But this isn't just about first-time home buyers. What comes next affects every price point, and it's showing up even more in the fastest growing parts of the state. Rapid growth infrastructure strain. See, this sounds like something only planners deal with until you're living it. In the fastest growing areas, you felt it before you can even put a name to it. It shows up in a longer commute, in classroom sizes, in running out of space, in everyday services, trying to keep up as more people move in. Schools are already full in some of the fastest growing counties. Roads that were built for lighter traffic are now carrying a lot more than they were meant to. In the Triangle, an I-40 between Raleigh and Durham, it backs up pretty much every day. Around Charlotte, growth has pushed people further from further out, with some commutes that are close to an hour each way. And for buyers who've been priced out of the center and have to drive back in, this hits close to home. This is happening because North Carolina's economy is strong right now. Companies are moving here, jobs are growing, and the state is attracting people from, frankly, all over. The infrastructure is trying to catch up, I promise. Now, Winston-Salem has been ahead of this in a lot of ways. Salem Parkway, the main corridor through downtown, formerly known as Business 40, was fully rebuilt and reopened in 2020, and traffic flows a lot better now. The Northern Beltway, a roughly 34-mile freeway project looping around the northern part of the metro, is still under construction, with large sections already done, most notably the Northeastern Corridor. It's one of the biggest infrastructure projects in the state. And commute times here usually fall in the 15 to tops 25 minutes, which is lower than the national average and a lot easier than what you're going to deal with in cities like Charlotte and Raleigh. It's not perfect, but it's moving in the right direction. And there's another side to growth at this scale that most buyers don't think about until they are already deep into the process. Price growth, the full picture. Home values around here are up over 100% since 2015. For a state that's built its reputation on being affordable, that's something you want to understand before you make an offer. See, that cost of living advantage compared to places like New York or California is still very real, but it's tighter than it used to be. Prices haven't dropped back to where they were a few years ago, and a lot of buyers are still waiting on that. That gap is real, and it's why some buyers, especially first-time buyers, feel more pressure than maybe they expected. Now, the pace has slowed. We're looking at a much more modest growth in 2026, not those big jumps from a few years ago. And when you compare prices here to where most people are coming from, the buying power is still very much there. If you're coming from New Jersey or the Bay Area or even coastal Connecticut, you're still going to see a very large difference. The biggest adjustment I see is this. Plan around today's prices, not what things looked like 3 years ago when you first started thinking about moving. That window is, frankly, gone. This one just looks different. And this price side connects to something most buyers only notice once they start walking through homes in areas they actually want. Aging infrastructure, what it means when you're buying. The most sought-after neighborhoods in Winston-Salem have something in common. Established streets, mature trees, homes with real character you can't replicate from new construction. They also have something else in common that doesn't make it into the listing description. North Carolina's infrastructure received a C- grade from the American Society of Civil Engineers. About 8% of bridges in the state are rated in poor condition. Some roads are deteriorating faster than they're being maintained. And the water and wastewater system in older sections of cities are carrying deferred maintenance burden that's been building for decades. I want to be clear, if you're coming from up north, the roads here will drive like a dream, but they are in relatively poor condition for North Carolina standards. However, the investment is real. The Federal Infrastructure Act is sending billions into the state. Bridge funding has increased significantly. A lot of what's currently in poor shape is actively in the queue to get fixed. And I'm saving the most underestimated daily reality of living in the state for the very last item on this list. It's the one I hear people say they wish someone had mentioned before they moved. But let me finish this one first. When you're shopping in one of these neighborhoods, the age of the infrastructure needs to be part of your due diligence. That doesn't make them bad places to buy. It means having your eyes open to it. Ask whether the property is on a municipal water system or a private well. Ask about the age of the water and the sewer lines in the area. You can do an inspection for that, by the way, and you should. Plan your renovation budget well with that in mind. And if you're set on new construction in the triad, the trade-off is that you're typically going to pay more or go a little further out from the urban core. The most sought-after established neighborhoods are, frankly, older by definition. That's part of what makes them desirable. Go in knowing what that means. And before we get to the last item, there's one more environmental reality I want to walk you through, because it changed enough in the last few years that guessing over it frankly wouldn't be fair. The weather is getting more extreme. We had 2 real winter storms this last season. For a place that usually, frankly, gets 0, that stands out. Summers are getting hotter, cold spells are hitting harder. Storms that used to show up in spring are now popping up in January. Flooding, heavy rain, stronger storms, you're seeing more of it. Right this very moment, we're seeing a drought. And that's not guesswork, it's what's been happening here the last several years. And then there's the humidity. I always tell people that there are about 2 to 3 weeks in July or August I have coined dragon's breath. The heat and humidity together hit at a level that catches people off guard, especially if they're coming from up north or out west where it might be dry. It's not just here, but it's very real, and it's better to know that going in than feel it for the first time in mid-July or August. But there's good news here too. The state has put a lot into better warning systems and emergency response. And compared to wildfire risk out west, extreme heat in Arizona or the Southwest, or hurricane exposure in Florida, the Piedmont Triad is still in a very manageable spot if you pick the right location. That's where the details count. Coastal areas, well, they might carry more risk. The mountains can get hit in ways that people frankly didn't expect. The Piedmont sits right in between, and that changes how you think and maybe where to buy. And when you look at all of it together, the weather and infrastructure and growth, it leads to the last point on the list. You're gonna need a car, full stop. My 14-year-old tells me this one should be first on the list. He's got some pretty strong opinions about the bus system here, and they're not great. Outside of the main downtown areas, you really do need a car in North Carolina. And that's frankly just how it works. The bus system in most of the Triad is quite limited. There's very minimal rail. But if you're used to walking to the store or taking a train to work, this is a real change, and it affects your monthly budget more than most people expect. If you're moving here as a couple, plan on probably having 2 cars. That's day-to-day life in most parts of the state. And if you've already been driving everywhere, this probably doesn't feel like much of a change at all. Most people moving here are coming from places where a car was already part of the daily life. For them, it's gonna feel pretty darn familiar. Charging stations are also showing up all across the state, which helps if you're thinking about going electric. You're also seeing the mixed-use areas in the bigger corridors. Cities like Winston-Salem have been putting real work into making parts of downtown more walkable, especially around the Innovation Corridor. But if you're coming here expecting walkable, transit-first lifestyle, that's tough to find in most parts of the state right now. Better to know that, frankly, going in. The people who regret moving to North Carolina are usually the ones who didn't know about these 8 things ahead of time. If you're thinking about making this move and want to talk through how any of this applies to your situation, send me an email at sales@theginthergroup.com today. And the next question I get all the time is whether Winston-Salem fits your lifestyle. I've lived here for almost 17 years, so I linked a video sharing my perspective on what that transition was really like. Please feel free to watch it. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next one.